Welcome to week number 2, the second episode of the Wealthy Legacy Journey. Kendall here and Mr. Nathan, and he
Hey,
actually is
guys.
bringing a really cool topic for us today. I want him to kind of kick it off with what he's wanting to talk about.
Oh man, he's just getting me right in there.
Yeah.
Digging the dirt. We had been discussing something and we thought, man, this would be a great topic, and it's something that's been on. It's been a focus of this week, and what I mean by focus was I've had like 3 random conversations this week with people that I highly respect, highly trust, but just kind of seeing the same pattern happen, and I've seen it even happen with myself. I'm sure you can, talk about it as well. But
I can.
what we're talking about today is, when we think about building something and we think about building a business and we want it to grow and all these different things, we can get very, and I'll say I can get very distracted by all those, carrots dangling, shiny new toys, as you'd say, and you forget to do what got you to be successful.
Yeah.
And so the conversations we've had this week were basically like, as we go into a different market, let's say, you're seeing different strategies being performed. You're seeing people get into different things. To give you an example, it would be like, let's say I flip 2 homes a month. That's like what I've been doing since I flipped.
Yeah, that's like really the core of what got you here, right? In your personal business.
Yeah, and so like at 2 flips a month, I knew we're going to make sure that it took care of my family, it took care of the people that worked for us, it brought us some profit. Then I'm gonna always maintain those 2 flips.
Right.
But what I've seen this past week and just hearing conversations, and it kind of reminded me was like, then all of a sudden it's like, well, let me buy 10 rentals, or let me go ahead and get into this thing or that thing. And then all of a sudden it's like the 2 flips aren't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see that's where it's like hard to get back down to the ground to where your business is built.
Because all of a sudden I think you kind of build on this excitement of this new opportunity.
Right.
But the problem is you ran so fast in this new opportunity, you lost your foundation. That was really what built you to where you were at. And now you're kind of losing everything because nothing is real. Everything's like so up in the air.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it is. And it reminded me of like even my real estate journey, like when we used to like buy leads. And I remember that, like I would buy leads and we would have a good solid like setup. And then all of a sudden it would be like, oh, let's try something else because it looks cooler, it's easier, it's faster. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, why aren't leads coming in? And then you realize because you forgot to keep doing what was working.
Right.
And that's something I just think is so important, especially right now, because we've been extremely blessed. Like at the end of the day, when I think of the growth, and people ask me a lot of times, like, how's business? How's business? How's business? And I'm like, man, it's great. I literally just was going to run this morning. The neighbor, John, we're talking, and we're just kind of small talk. And he's like, oh, so the market, and he's not in real estate or anything. And he's like, oh, I know how the market is, man. How's business? Is it tough for you? And I'm like, man, it's great. And people look at me kind of funny, but it's because we've been in a position to where our foundation, I feel, is very strong as far as like what we're doing as our principles. Yeah. And now it's to grow. And so when I see other people struggling, it hurts my heart because I'm thinking like, okay, well, what do you do to get back to the basics? Like, what do you need to do? Don't just completely go into a whole nother field because you were successful at doing what you already knew.
When I think, when I look at it, there's like 2 core stories of like people, your story being one of them that, I think you applied this really well. And, I even look at back on your journey because I've been walking, with you for a few years now. Whenever you started into flips, Nathan started into flips, he was a real estate guy. He was doing leads. And I remember for years, even though he was being really successful, one of the most successful guys I knew in flips, he was still doing the realtor stuff. And y'all ran with the realtor stuff and tried to keep both plates spinning for a really long time until years of showing that flips were profitable and proven. And that's when you and they were more profitable. And that's when you finally let the realtor stuff go. And that doesn't necessarily mean doing it all yourself, right? Like you built a team to get that done. But then at the end of the day, once you had to pick a direction for your team to kind of go the most profitable avenue, it was like, hey, we're going to go this way.
Right.
There was another guy that I worked with one time, and long story short, he was a computer guy and knew a lot about like coding and the technical stuff. But I remember he was really trying to get into real estate. He actually ended up paying a lot of money for, other guru courses and stuff. And I
They're
remember
out
one
there.
day, yeah, and like they're out there, they'll take your money, right? But at the end of the day, I remember I sat down and I talked to them. I was like, dude, there's so much money in technology, in building software and applications, so many ideas out there that need to get funded, need to get built, like that you could partner up on and be a part of stuff. Like, you should take your core talents, these things that you're already applying. I mean, he just worked a job, but you're already applying in the market in that way. You've already built a skill set, just like you had built a skill set as, realtor. Now you've built a skill set with your team as a flipper, and now it's like, how do we maintain that while we build forward? For him, it was his technical, kind of side. It was like, why don't you take that skill set to the market, and figure out how to apply that to be able to begin, building as an investor, building your wealth. And so
Right.
I think all this kind of comes back to is, what is it that you already have mastered? Keep doing that well as you move forward. And I'm kind of a hypocrite in that, like, to be honest with you, because, I was doing the flips, we had the flips going, but then I left the flips to go learn a whole new thing in internet marketing and all this kind of stuff. And while that was some amazing training, it was like the shiny object syndrome. And I left what was working with this, fairly substantial size nest egg, but I ended up depleting that nest egg. And then really quickly, I had to go figure out, how do I spin up the next six-figure business to be able to support my family. And so then that's when I met up with Aaron and Carson. I did the land deals. It wasn't a far stretch from what I'd already been doing with houses. Very quickly, we were able to spin up revenue. But then as the market slowed down around the end of the year, I was ready for my next shiny opportunity. So then I went and did something else. And I mean, I kind of just got on this cycle of like highs and lows of putting myself, through this. And I remember there was one night actually that it was a really, really tough night for me. I called Nathan, and I just really needed to talk to a friend. And having good friends in your life that can pour into you, that's so key. But I called Nathan and I was like, dude, like, here's where I'm at with my business. I don't know what to do for next step. I was really thinking about getting a job, quitting being an entrepreneur. I'd already been an entrepreneur for half a decade. And like, I just didn't want to put my family through the roller coaster anymore. And we ended up talking, and he really called me, for one last hoorah as an entrepreneur to try to build something with him. But the commitment that you asked for me was to be committed to it for 2 years, to not change my path, not change my course, because up to that point I kind of bounced around a lot. And and I think that just that request right there changed a perspective inside of me, when I was like, wow, to really sit back and think about, I really have been bouncing all over the place and not sticking with the core things that I've learned and have figured out how to do well. And then building from that, I just have gone to a new shore, burned the boats, and tried to conquer a new frontier. And yeah, and so I think that's like the whole thing that you're talking about is, hey, instead of trying to conquer a new frontier and burn the boats, how can you leave, this thing working and running, even if that means you build a team around it and then you go into the new frontier, but this team is still back here doing this thing.
Right. Right.
And then you can go then into a new frontier being funded by what was already working.
Oh, that's good. Hey, well, and you mentioned something that I really want to touch on. You said like just having people speak into your life, and you talk about having friends. And I'm hoping that obviously what we're doing here, what we put out there, we're hoping that somebody can take something from it, even if it's just one little thing, and when it applies. Because, and I want to share three, because when you said that, all of a sudden something came to me, and there were three men that over this journey since I got into real estate were so critical, but they're so simple. And one of them was, Dennis Tuttle. A lot of people know Dennis. Great. I mean, just great man. And, when he was teaching KW, we used to do a thing called the GCI. But then you would have you basically work backwards, and you would work backwards to determine what is it that you need on a minimum. And I very much agree with this, because if you know what your minimum is, then you know where that bar needs to be 100% at all times. And then everything above that is what you get to grow into. But if you know what your minimum is, you get to work backwards. So if you need to make this amount, then you need to do this many deals to make that amount. Then you need to break it all down to the very, very core, and then just continue to build off that core. Then there's a guy, and I say this because he'll, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with this guy. But one day we ended up walking into this guy at Chipotle, and he said one thing to me that I'll still remember to this day. And it's something so simple. And it was actually Chad Smith, and he runs an amazing real estate team. But he just said, be really, really good and be the expert at the one thing. And for this, it was like listing. If you want to be a great listing agent as a realtor, then don't dabble into all these different buyer leads and this and that and this. Just be really, really good at listing. Right. And then in my investing journey, even after we only had done maybe, I think it was maybe around 6 flips, I met up with the guy, James Like. And James Like, once again, amazing guy, great friend, great brother. And he told me something. He went and we had the breakfast at old Burleson Brunch House. I remember, great place. If you never had it, it's awesome. But we went there, and I remember same thing. He said one thing to me, and he said, be really, really good at flipping single family. And once you master that, go to something else. And so I remember even when he told me that, it made me realize, like, okay, this is all a rhythm. It's all the same routine. Yeah. Be really good at what your core is. And then if you want to grow from there, keep that intact. Don't let that go, And we've kind of, I think, I'll be honest, flips are boring now. Yeah. And we can get into that because I really want to share the truth behind that, because there's some falsehood behind, what it looks like out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so like the 2 things that you said that I thought were really cool is figuring out, and this is something that we're even doing in our business right now, as we're starting up NK investments, and we're figuring out, the 2 kind of core things is, number 1, what's the minimum? That was like one kind of idea. If there was a bullet point note to take, it'd be, what is the minimum that you need? You have to have that number in order to be able to work back and figure out, okay, so how much volume, what do you have to push through in order to be able to meet that minimum? If you're a one-man show, that's kind of what's your salary? If you have a team, it's what is that team going to cost you every year, right? And you even set those goals every year, right? I mean, even in your business, you're thinking, okay, well, we want to grow to this point. What are we going to need to do to be able to build the team to that point? It's easier if you kind of know where you're, where you're at, you're in flips, where you want to go is to this size team or this next level or this next opportunity. And so then you're able to kind of from there dissect, okay, well, here's what needs to happen in order to be able to get from here to there. Right.
Right.
And then the other thing is just narrowing down to exactly what are you going to be doing? And so like those 2 things of figuring out what do we need, like as a minimum, as a base, and then what are we going to be doing? That's been some core fundamental questions that we've been talking about over the last 2 weeks. We've been really building this idea,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a great thought. And I think we've even, for us, just even just discussing that, I think like if you have a minimum, and I think we were at like maybe like $250,000 or something like that. It's kind of where we were.
That's like our minimum. Yeah.
And then how do you work backwards? And, I'll share this, like even 2 weeks in, when you build a business and you're doing things, you're building stuff to do that, but you're trying to hit that minimum. So it's like for us, even just 2 days, was it yesterday?
Yesterday, we locked up our first deal with this venture.
Yeah, and so just immediately,
and it wasn't even a huge deal, honestly, but it's a little bit of a chip. It's just chipping away at that minimum goal.
Yeah, and so we have a goal. Obviously we have bigger goals to hit. But if you looked at the minimum, and I thought about this yesterday, I was like, if you look at what we do even on this deal we hit yesterday, so we bought it, and we feel like I think on a minimum we could probably make about 20 grand.
Right.
On this deal. Now, could it make 40? Could it make 50? Could it make 80 if we do a couple strategies with it? Sure. But when I look at what the minimum is, and I think 20, and let's say our goal is to be a minimum at $250,000 in the business by the end of the year, well, then we just hit that minimum for month 1, and we're 2 weeks in. And it's like, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, okay, if you're at $250,000 a year, you need to make basically 20,000 a month, a little over that. Yeah. 22 or 21.5 something, but and so when you look at that one deal, that hit the minimum, so we're already basically ahead.
Gives you breathing room. Okay, now everything from here is just cherry on top.
Yeah, so you're gonna say it, and it's like 2 weeks you get to just grow. You're just growing above that minimum.
Right.
And that's just it's a small example because I don't think we really have a whole surface yet here in a core, but I think it just goes to show the same mentality. Now we can't take that and just say, hey, let's throw another 20 grand into something else to grow something different.
Right.
Now that's just covering our base. And that's
But that
that goal.
deal, it's actually a mobile home lot that we picked
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
And our focus right now is, we talked about, and we're still narrowing this. There may be some shifting and changing, but what we're thinking we're going to do is like buying up land and doing land development, and then buying mobile homes, and if there's possible a small rehab factor with that, and then again working with the land if there's any extra land to be able to do some land development, split off some lots or anything like that. So this being a mobile home lot, but actually it's a mobile home that burned down, is like right inside of our buy box and where we want to go. And so it doesn't distract us from the cause, it doesn't distract us from the direction that we're wanting to go. And so now we're looking at, here's the direction, how do we grow that pipeline? And so like one of the things that we're even working on right now is, okay, we want to be able to partner up with realtors and real estate agents to be able to help find these deals for us that we know are there, but to be able to just start opening up that pipeline as quick as we can. But everything has to be going this direction. We're not willing to just look at any type of property, right? We're not going to be looking at apartments, and we're probably not going to be looking at a single family in Arlington.
Correct.
Even though they could be good deals, like that's not what we're trying to lock in right now. Our silos is land that can be developed and or mobile homes on land that could still but it's all about land or possibly land with mobile homes. We may get a land with a house, but again, that would be a large piece of land that the biggest focus of profit on that is the development, not the house.
Correct.
And so like for us, we have that goal of $250,000. We know what type of deals we're looking for. And now it's very easy not to just willy-nilly say, hey, I'm looking for any type of deal out there that's going to make me money. Even though you would think that would help you, I don't know, like find more opportunities and more deals. I think when you're not focused in on exactly the market share that you're wanting to take, you have such a shotgun approach to what you're trying to do that you end up not really getting anything, right?
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I think just to touch on that, like one thing I'll mention is, this year's taught us some things. Obviously, the market's changed, and that's taught us some things. But we've had some losses for the first time ever in this, on some projects. And when we dissect those projects and we dissect the houses, we think, well, why did we buy that? Why did we buy this? Why did we buy that? None of those really fit into our buy box. ARVs were higher than what we normally would be with, and you start learning, like, if you just stuck with what 100% works, yeah, there is a bigger reward possibly on some of these. But it just goes to show that when there's correction, it's going to hurt those bigger reward ones. And one thing I've said over the last month with a few people was, it's kind of a funny reality that on all of the properties we bought with mobile homes as a Bistro Group, like, we've never lost money on a mobile home purchase itself. Like, never. Now on houses we have, and we've seen even what's recently, but we've never lost money on a mobile home plan. And so once again, it goes back to that same criteria. And so with land development, it's going to be an exciting thing because, one, we're able to help somebody solve a problem.
And it's a space we've been in before. And it's a space I've been in before. So
it's going to be, and it's something that you got to have patience with, but it's all about networking and finding the right connections on who can do it. Who do we feel confident to do it? Recently, we're currently working one in Dallas on something else, and Dallas is denying everything. And I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, you guys don't want these tracks to where you could grow taxes, grow the economy, grow Dallas, grow it all, right? But they want conformity. They want it to be exactly the way they want it. So it could sit there for 100 years and never be developed. And they'd almost rather have that than have it the way they want it. And that's okay. But you learn those things. Yeah. And so it's like, now it's like, okay, what are we going to do? But at the end of the day, that's also going to provide 9 homes for somebody.
But then, and here's what I love about what you do in business. You still have the flips going over here, and then you put a very small amount of eggs in this basket of Dallas land development, right? So at the end of the day, if that deal completely flops, you're not freaking out because you're like, oh my gosh, I just tied up all my cash in this deal. It's not going through. It's not selling. Like, I thought it was going to be this huge payday. Now you're freaking out. Like, you're not in that boat.
Correct.
Because you have all this momentum over here. So it's like, well, if this doesn't really work out, we learn something, we move on, we try something else. And I think that's really the key of siloing off your different models is you have this that work, make sure that, and this is something that I'm learning myself. You've implemented it, I'm learning it, but how do you silo what's working and then go, begin to try these other things that you want to, and even those other things you want to try, silo them. Like even for us, we've talked about how mobile homes with land is one silo, right? And that's one silo that we probably know a little bit better than land development. And there's the other silo of land development. And, I don't want to go too far into a whole nother, idea, but there's two guys that really know about land and marketing for land and developing land that we're probably going to end up partnering with on these land developments to get access to their knowledge, to be able to share resources in that. That's something for another day. But, I think really just to boil down what we're talking about today, and it really is so crucial to whether your business is a startup or a multi-million-dollar company, is you have to know what you have to get done by the end of year, to net in order to be able to keep the doors open. And then making sure that you're focusing on what works, siloing that, and then you can try this other stuff, but don't leave what's working behind.
Right. No, that's true. And one thing I'll share, it's a funny thing because I think about it, and when you think about McDonald's, if you've ever, heard stories about McDonald's, watched any of the movies, I think they've come out with a couple, they say they're not in the business of making burgers. They're actually in the business of buying real estate, because where they buy real estate is where they make their money, where they grow. And so it's on that foundation. If they all of a sudden just said, we're going to just start buying and put some McDonald's in places that don't, do what it's supposed to do or get the traffic, well, they're going to lose money.
Or if they just try to start making gourmet burgers, nobody's going to go to McDonald's for gourmet burgers.
And that's what's crazy about it, is they're making the same burger they've been making for years upon years, but then they introduce all these new things. And when they introduce these new things, some of them are flops, but they still maintain that core. And I was thinking, man, in a time where we went to a restaurant yesterday, and it was like a 2-piece snack pack was like $8 at a fast food restaurant. I'm like, a snack pack is $8? What in the heck is going on? But then when you go to McDonald's,
a super deal guy.
Yeah. but if you look at McDonald's app, and I'm bringing this up because, well, one, this is how I think, but if you look at their app and you go to McDonald's app, you can get stuff on there that ends up making your meals cheaper than it was 20 years ago. In a time when inflation is happening, in a time when you are having to pay $8 for a snack pack at another fast food restaurant, why are they able to do that? And it's because, I go back and say, because they're in the business of buying real estate.
Right.
They don't, it's not so much on the margin on the food. The traffic is going to make them what they need to make. And it's just a fascinating thing. And that it goes back to the same thing. You just have to know what is the absolute core of what you're doing in any business, not just real estate.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really powerful. Well, so we're about 20 minutes.
Yep.
So before we cut out, this was kind of your big topic that you want to talk about. I think it's been awesome. And I think there's huge takeaways in this lesson that we've applied to our business. But if you were to just kind of leave the audience with one final conclusive thought for today that they could just chew on for the rest of the day, as they go through next week and are thinking about ideas, how would you wrap this thing up and put a bow on it?
I would say, if whether you're in a time where you're discouraged and maybe you feel like going somewhere else, going some other direction, or if you're doing okay but you're just wanting to refocus, I would say go out and just figure out, what do you need, in a sense, what do you need to survive? Really think about that. Think of a number, what you need to survive. And then if you know the industry that you're currently in, and you know how it profits, all those different things, just ask yourself, what do I need to do to get back on track to get to where I need to survive? And then start focusing on that, and just go back to that.
Go to the basics.
And build the basics.
And sometimes it's gonna hurt. Sometimes you have to cut some stuff off to get there, right?
And it may be just go back to that and really focus on that, because it'll even just be, just rewarding to see you go back to that and work on that and see it succeed. But it's sometimes the most boring stuff is the stuff that gets us through, and sometimes exciting things just kind of pop up and come our way. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, awesome. Thanks for stopping in for this episode of the Wealthy Legacy Journey. It's been awesome hanging out with you guys, and we will see you guys next week.
See you next week.